So Ayesha, thank you for joining me after your talk, Heart With, and Our Own Precious Lives. But today I do want to switch subjects and revisit previous work of yours from fieldwork last year that seems relevant for today. And the name of the piece is What We're Gonna Do.
What we gonna do?
What We're Gonna Do. And I really would love for you to share more about that piece for those who haven't had the privilege of seeing and witnessing and experiencing it, and to share more about the inspiration behind it.
Well, the piece, again, What We Gonna Do, and it was a conversation between me and my grandmother. And her picture was there, and we were just talking because in that moment, I just felt really disconnected and taken aback. Frankly, I always thought he would certainly have an opportunity, but thinking and seeing are two different things. And there was just a pall around everything I did when 45 was elected. And so I was part of field work. And I began to, again, what supports me in my work, what informs everything I do, is that lineage piece. What can I pull from? Because for me, the despair, frustration often comes from feeling separate from that, right? I'm experiencing this by myself. This is all new, and, what am I going to do? And because I grew up in a multi-generational household, after I get, upset and this has never happened before, I went, no, this has happened before. And I was particularly interested in the response of people after Reconstruction ended. Mm-hmm. Because these people had gone from being enslaved.
That's right.
For in a very short time, you can walk on the sidewalk. You've got troops protecting your rights. You've got black men senators from Mississippi and South Carolina. Folks are building schools. There's this amazing rush of activity and possibility, not unlike, I think, many of us felt when Obama was elected in 2008. Not that everything was perfect, but we were moving forward. We had moved to a different place, never to return. And Trump was elected. And we're not even talking about a conventional politician. We're talking about someone who's grabbing things, who's someone who is clearly racist in language, if not in heart. I don't know what he feels inside. I know what he says. And it wasn't a deal breaker. And so I began to consider what happened in that short period where there was all this possibility, and then all of a sudden a deal was made, the troops were taken out, and you just left. And I placed that in the context of all the blood that had been shed, including white blood. I mean, that was what I found so interesting about that moment, and what must have been incredibly confusing. And that's what's addressed in the piece, is it wasn't just black people. There are whole towns where the young white male population was absolutely disseminated.
Yes.
Your sons, and this wasn't over a period of 20 years. I think if I remember correctly, 12, 15? It was a very short period of time. And in that short period of time, the forces of white supremacy rose and said, well, that's enough of that. I think that's what I was interested in, is to go from this place of enslavement, and then all this blood is shed. There are black men that are embracing their ability to fight against slavery. All of this is going on. It must have been just just mind-blowing to some of the people. And in this 12 years, I can walk on the sidewalk, my rights are protected, everything will be different. Not necessarily terrific and we're never going to have problems, but we have come from one place to another place. And then within that short time span, you're back. And we're not calling it slavery, we're calling it something else, but we're back. And the fear to go from possibility and a sense of confidence in yourself and in your world to it's all gone. And that's what I was interested in investigating. Mama was born in 1902. But my question to her is, what did they say? What did the older people say? How did they handle that? You know, what we gonna do? You know, these people, the realization that not even white male blood being spilled in the hundreds of thousands was sufficient to keep white supremacy at bay. That because not only were black people expendable, those white lives were expendable. I used, I borrowed a bit from W.B. Du Bois in his Africa and the World, where he has the Victorian lady sitting in this parlor, and you know, you got the ivory here, you got the china here, and he details basically she's sitting in a room of oppression, she's sitting in a real room of exploitation, she's sitting in a room of blood. And what this piece spoke to is basically this sort of American innocence arising, you know, young woman arising out of a sea of blood, you know, that just sort of, you know, falls off of her, and she daintily steps on the shore, shaking off that last little drop and going on about her way. And clearly, everybody didn't go crazy, although I can't imagine a more crazy-making moment.
Yes.
I believe a lot of people went crazy. I believe trauma. So now we've got the trauma of hundreds of years of slavery on top of we're free. Oh, we're not.
That's right.
And what that does, what is the response to that? What is the response that is not self-denying, self-destructive? What is the response? I know, again, a lot of people probably hurt themselves, hurt those around them in their frustration and anger and impotence.
Yes.
But what was it that those that didn't fall into that? How did they handle that? And I opened myself to my knowledge of her, how she was in the world. And in the piece, I talked about the response. You know, the skillful response was to build. The skillful response was to not freeze or to write treatises on how could you, because they did.
Yes, they did.
You know, so the response was to step into beauty, to step into power, no matter how narrow the space given. Certainly my grandmother was fabulous and stylish and would talk about if you have only 2 dresses, you know, wash one Iron One, and hit the world being fabulous. She cleaned for a living, and she insisted you call her Mrs. Evans. White people called her Mrs. Evans. That's that personal dignity that has nothing to do with what happens. And so in exploring that, in that moment, I reconnected to that history. Often, because of how history of black people are taught, at least certainly when I was in school, it's shameful. You were so weak, you let yourself be enslaved. You were so weak and stupid, and you were mules, and you and it was, again, not the fighting that she did, and no, I'm not, yes, you are. No, she didn't engage in that. No, girl, no. And what's your name? Mrs. Evans. And we're going to build these institutions, and we're going to go on and not get trapped in somebody else's delusion. And I think that's what came for me, and hopefully with the audience, is the recognition that this society, in the worst ways, is fed by this unending vat of toxic white supremacy in small ways, in large ways, that teaches invisibility, teaches separation, teaches people to be unaware. And the gift of that generation of people who did not go crazy, who did not hurt themselves or other people, is awareness without reaction, except this is what I'm going to do, which is not anything to do with what you're going to do, and this is horrible. But again, recovering memory. But you've been trying to kill me since 1619. I seem to be here.
Yes.
And it's not because you like me very, very much. It's because I choose life. And I ended the piece with the family motto: I'm not going to let you kill me, and I don't believe in suicide. And it is that I continue to rest in. Remembering the call for us to not act like this is brand new.
That's right.
To some people, this is really brand new. To feel unsafe. For some people, this is the first time in their lives that they have felt unsafe. But that's not our story. That's not our history. In fact, and this is certainly an outgrowth of the piece for me and informs now what I'm doing with Heart With, we are central to this struggle that we are engaged in. No other people in the United States know what we know. Deal with what we deal with every day. We have the capacity of awareness and heart that no other people have. Not by virtue that we are inherently better, but this is what that has been given to us by virtue of the nature of our oppression. There are people of color, but we are the faces, as the title of the book is, we are the faces at the bottom of the well.
Right.
That's right. We are the faces and nobody else knows that. Everybody else defines themselves in relation to being better than us. So we are the only ones that, by some genius. We are geniuses in the spiritual path of personal liberation that is not held down by resentment and hate. Otherwise, this country would already be a bloody mess. And it is incumbent upon us, I believe, as Black people, to be central to every discussion. Because if it does not include us, it is not an authentic discussion around what we're going to do.